But we're basically a collaboration of 50 now, as of last week, private family foundations, community foundations, and United Ways from across the state, all working together to protect, promote, and improve public education through policy and advocacy. And Stephanie asked me to come today to just talk a little bit about the legislative session specifically and pre-K specifically. And you've heard some of my colleagues who spoke earlier already hit a lot of the highlights, but I might just dig into a couple of additional details. The picture we took actually from the 2017 legislative session with Chairman Larry Taylor from Senate Education. And in this picture, we're actually talking about blended learning, not pre-K, but I really like that picture because it represents a lot of the foundation folks from across the state who work in this area. And we basically do two things. I wish we had more HERCs in the world, because what Aaron said at the beginning about research that's impactful, that you can translate to practice, legislators need good data. Everybody can produce everyone can produce data, and people use data for all kinds of reasons. Some are good, some are bad, some are politically motivated, some aren't. But the fact that we have objective research partners in the state like HERC is really, y'all really are a treasure. I wish there was like a statewide affiliate or, a replicable model that we could use, because legislators really need good data. And those who really want to do a good job care about good data and will go work to find good data. So that's pretty much what we do. We work sort of in two areas. We find and actually develop good data with our partners. So we don't do it individually, but we partner with folks who do really good research. And then we support advocacy organizations across the state, not just in one region, but across the state, who take that data with us, with the policy recommendations that are associated with it, and disseminate that up to and through a legislative session. So I just wanted to highlight, and there's lots of copies in the hallway, of a couple of pieces of research that we've done over the years with our partner Texans Care for Children, which is a really amazing statewide 0 to 8 policy shop. So they are based in Austin, but they operate all over this state, and they're the folks that go down to the legislature during every legislative session and fight for all things 0 to 8, things that we know kids 0 to 8 need. So in the past, a lot of what we've done is take a statewide look at the sort of state, the state of pre-K across the state. So before 2 sessions ago, we actually passed a piece of legislation that created about $118 million in grant funding for pre-K that I think someone mentioned earlier. That's right, you knew. And that money then in 2017 was subsequently cut. But what we kept as part of that legislation was a need to collect more data around pre-K programs. And in this legislative session, not only did we get full day funding for eligible 4-year-olds, but there's a lot of pieces of the legislation that will be looking at the data component, collecting data, not just at the district level, but at the classroom level. So then groups like HERC don't necessarily have to go out and spend, I don't know how many thousands of dollars y'all have to spend just to get access to the data from TEA and other repositories of data. But now a lot of this data will become much more available. So the big headline for the session, and y'all read all about it in the paper, and Houston Chronicle was actually really, really good about covering this stuff, was the big school finance bill. For many years, we have been working at the legislature to build the political will to do something for pre-K. And there was actually a campaign that we kind of participated in this legislative session that we called Stop the Yo-Yo, which was essentially the idea. We ran around the Capitol and passed out yo-yos to all the legislators, and we had a press conference and everybody wore purple. But the message was, you've got to stop, the state needs to stop the yo-yo funding for pre-K. So 1 year we'll fund it, then we'll cut it, then we'll fund it, then we'll cut it. And this big school finance bill that just passed addresses the funding in a much more sustainable way. So in the past, it was grant funding, right? A lot of it, this extra additional support from the state was grant funding. In addition to the half-day funding that the average daily attendance, the money that follows the kid to the half-day program. Now we've got formula funding for full day pre-K for eligible 4-year-olds. So this growing political will is something that we've been seeing for many sessions. This yo-yo funding, stopping the yo-yo, which I just mentioned. Someone mentioned, we need to go, was it Nancy? We need to go younger than 4. I think it's like Ellie said, this is the first step in a series of steps over many legislative sessions where we need to keep coming back to the legislature to make them realize that 4 is a good start, but we need to get to full day funding for 3, and so on and so on and so on, and really go down that continuum. I think what you're also seeing among the legislature is more of a focus on English language learners, because there are so many kids in our system that are ELLs. I think Houston, again, is the epicenter for that. There is much more focus and targeted funding that will support English language learners specifically. So really recognizing that these kids come into these pre-K programs speaking one language, may or may not be English, and so we need to be supporting them in that language. That's a huge, huge heavy lift that we have only begun to address. And then I think, again, this focus on the fact that this is a workforce issue for families. I mean, I'm a working mom. I don't know how many working moms we have in the room, but it's really hard to do a half-day program even if you have the resources. So for a lot of these working families and low-income families, a full-day program is a workforce issue, and it actually allows people to keep jobs, particularly women in households. And then again, I think just this focus on quality. So we've scratched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to providing this full day funding for all eligible 4-year-olds. But what we need to now start to look at, as a lot of the folks before me said, is to really look at the quality. So there are no ratio requirements in pre-K, and there are no classroom size requirements in pre-K. And the classroom sizes, as Erin said, can be really, really high, but really even more importantly than the class size is the ratio. And so these are the types of issues that we'll start to delve into now that we've gotten the first thing off the list, which again took us, how many years, Caroline, did it take us to get to this point? Working together. So I have this slide, and it's way more information than you need on the big school finance bill. And we're not talking about school finance reform today, but I did want to include it because it just gives you a flavor for what actually happened when you hear about systemic or transformational reform that came out of this legislative package. I'm not sure it's transformational, but I think it's a great step in the right direction. And you see things like the basic allotment going from $5,140 per student to $6,150. I mean, that's a significant bump. So we know that money matters in education, but that money needs to be well spent. And there's no better investment than in the early childhood space. So that was what we were saying to the legislature for the last how many years. I did just want to, again, we have these in the slide deck so that you can go back to these because that's a lot of information to cover. But when you start looking at quality, you're looking at, standardization of kindergarten readiness assessments. These are all in the bill. This is all part of the legislation now. So you'll start seeing, new reading standards, literacy and math proficiency plans, more data collection on class size and ratio so we can tackle that next session. These are the components that are going to be really important moving forward. And of course, we've got to implement this. So do we have any district folks in the room? The districts are going to have to do this. And we heard from our earlier speakers that Houston is way, way, way more advanced than a lot of districts when it comes to providing full day pre-K in the first place. So you all will be able, here in Houston, you will be able to do some more interesting things with this early education allotment beyond just getting to the full day, which is great. I did want to just mention one thing about childcare, and I'm sorry, Stephanie, I did not watch my time. Can you tell me how much time I have left? A few minutes. 1 minute? Okay. Diana, she overruled you. She said 1. Just a quick thing about childcare. It's not pre-K, but it's really important. If any of you guys followed the Statesman series on the childcare safety, it was like a series of 10 stories. Lots of movement in this session, acknowledgement by the legislature that childcare facilities we need data, we need transparency, we need improved safety. Too many kids are dying in unlicensed childcare facilities, and it's not acceptable. And then finally, I'll skip that one, the mental health piece. We've talked a lot about that today. I mean, Mike's program is an amazing example of what needs to happen around trauma-informed care and ACEs and social emotional learning. Thanks to the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute and a lot of other partners in the room and across the state, we have made serious progress on the mental health front for little kids. And that's something that we'll just need to continue to do more and more of. I'll just leave that slide up there and y'all can read it while I'm finishing, but I would just say the 2 misses, you always want to talk about the wins, but we had a couple of misses this session. And I don't know how much you all have been reading about this in the paper, but again, the Chronicle's done a great job. Maternal health, there was so much possibility there this session. There was so much momentum coming out of last session for maternal health. Very little got done there. And then Medicaid, real easy bill that could have helped kids who are already eligible for Medicaid stay on Medicaid because of basically paperwork. Just a very easy, simple way to streamline paperwork, and that bill died. So kids are coming off of Medicaid, and we've seen for the first time in a long time a decrease in the number of kids who are covered under Medicaid, who are eligible. So lots more work to do. We're just getting started, and it's great that you all care so much about this issue. Thank you for all your work.